the very first day at school, teach your child the lesson of saving. Open a Sisu Udana account with People's Bank. Initial deposit given by the bank. Higher interest with more gifts and benefits. Also, My Activity organizers for all kids starting grade 1. Sisu Udana from People's Bank. Give your child the strength to succeed.
In a few moments, the news.
Sisu Udana from People's Bank. Give your child the strength to succeed.
This is the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation.
The time is 6:15 p.m. This is the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. Here's the news edited and read by Ramesh Pires. First, the headlines. The Cabinet postpones approval for 21st Constitutional Amendment. All government institutions except agencies providing essential services to be declared holidays on Fridays for the next 3 months. The Foreign Minister highlights significant progress made in human rights at UNHCR session. The Minister of Education says $65 million is required in order to import the quota of paper and printing material for next year. The government eases restrictions imposed on public sector workers taking up employment overseas. The Cabinet of Ministers grants approved a lift the ban imposed on Angampura martial arts. In news overseas, the UN chief slams delusional fossil fuels dash amid Ukraine war. In sports, it's cricket, Sri Lanka versus Australia, first ODI, Sri Lanka to bat first in Kandy. Now the local news in detail. Approving the proposed 21st Amendment to the Constitution has been further postponed by the Cabinet of Ministers. According to Justice Minister Wijayadasa Rajapaksa, the weekly meeting of the Cabinet of Ministers convened yesterday and has not approved the constitutional amendments, as it was decided that further educating the political party leaders in this regard is necessary. Thereby, several political party leaders will be informed of the 21st Amendment to the Constitution at a discussion scheduled for next Thursday. Subsequently, the 21st Amendment to the Constitution is expected to be approved at the meeting of the Cabinet of Ministers next Monday. The Foreign Affairs Minister, Professor J.L. Pires, addressing the 50th regular session of the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva, highlighted the significant progress made on post-conflict consolidation through domestic processes despite the grave social and economic situation in the country. Minister Pires noted that Sri Lanka is actively engaged in evolving an all-party consensus regarding the need for the 21st Amendment to the Constitution to consolidate seminal democratic values enshrined in Parliament, independent institutions, and salutary checks and balances on the power of the executive, and to amend the Draconian Prevention of Terrorism Act. The Minister of Education, Susil Premchand, says $65 million is required in order to import the quota of paper and printing material for next year. The minister, speaking to media in Kandy, said Sri Lanka imports paper and doesn't manufacture paper locally. He noted that manufacturing took place previously at factories in Ambelipitia and Wadachene. The Education Minister said the estimations have been handed over to the Treasury, the Ministry of Trade, and the Indian High Commission in Sri Lanka. This news broadcast comes to you from the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation.
Sisu Udana from People's Bank. Give your child the strength to succeed.
We continue with more local news. The government has reached a decision to ease restrictions imposed on public sector workers taking up employment overseas. Accordingly, the new circulars will be issued amending the existing provisions to enable public sector workers to obtain no-pay leave for a maximum of 5 years without affecting their seniority and pension for employment or other productive work overseas. The proposal in this regard was tabled by the Minister of Public Administration, Home Affairs, Provincial Councils and Local Government, Dinesh Gunawardena, considering the prevailing economic situation. The Cabinet of Ministers has granted approval to a proposal to publish a gazette to lift the ban imposed on Angampura martial arts. The proposal to lift the ban imposed on Angampura was approved by the Cabinet in 2019. However, the relevant gazette has not been granted thus far. Accordingly, the proposal presented by the Minister of Sports to publish the gazette to lift the ban has been approved. Accordingly, the Ministry of Sports and Youth Affairs will take steps to promote Angampura, an important traditional game in the country which was banned under the British rule. Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority says it expects to attract around 800,000 tourists in 2022 with an estimated revenue of $800 million. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe engaged in discussions with stakeholders of the tourism sector today at the Prime Minister's office, he instructed the officials to prepare a plan to attract tourists from India for the next 6 months. The Premier also requested relevant authorities to make arrangements for the resumption of operations of the Palade Airport. And that ends local news.
From the very first day at school, teach your child the lesson of saving. Open a Sisu Dana account with People's Bank. My activity organizers for all kids starting grade 1.
The main news story is brought to you by Siddhalepa Vedamahatmya.
Moving on to the main news story, the Cabinet of Ministers has given approval to the proposal to declare Fridays as holidays for public sector employees from this week due to prevailing transportation difficulties. According to Minister Dinesh Gunawardena, this will not include essential services including health, power and energy, education, water, electricity, transport, port and air services and defence. Further, it was decided to provide the government officials with the necessary facilities to engage in agricultural activities in their backyards or elsewhere as a solution to the looming food shortage. And that came to you in the main news story.
The main news story was brought to you by Siddhalepa Vedamahatmya.
Moving on to Watchlight, the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka says the Ceylon Electricity Board will work to ensure power interruptions will be avoided as much as possible. The PUCSL said the decision was reached in view of Poson Poya today. Scheduled power cuts are due to be limited to 1 hour today in view of Poson Poya. And that came to you in Watchlight. A bulletin of world news is coming up. First, the headlines of the world news. The UN chief slams delusional fossil fuels dash amid Ukraine war. The EU set to take legal action against UK over post-Brexit deal changes. World's richest have lost $1.4 trillion in 2022 after rapid gains. And now the world news in detail. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has accused some rich countries of having made a dangerous dash for fossil fuels in response to the war in Ukraine, warning the new investments being made in coal, oil and gas are delusional given their impact on climate change. Guterres said in a video address today to the Austrian World Summit, the climate conference held in Vienna, that the energy crisis exacerbated by the war in Ukraine has been a perilous doubling down on fossil fuels by the major economies. The meeting marks the first important gathering of its kind since the latest United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP26, was held in Glasgow, Scotland last November. The EU is expected to launch legal action against the UK government this week over its decision to scrap some post-Brexit trade arrangements. Ministers insist current checks on some goods travelling from Great Britain to Northern Ireland must end to avoid harm to the peace process. They published a parliamentary bill on Monday aimed at overriding parts of the deal signed with the EU in 2020. But Brussels say going back on the arrangements breaks international law. The Northern Ireland Protocol is part of the Brexit deal which keeps Northern Ireland in the EU's single market for goods. The 500 wealthiest people in the world have lost a combined $1.4 trillion this year, including $206 billion yesterday. According to the Bloomberg Billionaires Index, the loss is attributed to pressure on global financial markets due to high interest rates and inflation anxiety. The data shows that the ranks of the wealthy in Asia-Pacific increased just 4.2%, trailing Europe and falling further behind North America after dominating growth of rich people for the past decade. The US, Japan, China and Germany remains among the top countries where most of the world's wealthy live. Back to the headlines of the world news. The UN chief slams delusional fossil fuels dash amid Ukraine war. The EU set to take legal action against UK over post-Brexit deal changes. And world's richest have lost $1.4 trillion in 2022 after rapid gains. And that concludes World News. Moving on to development news. The Hambantota International Port recently handled the largest roll-on, roll-off shipment of 2022 to date. MV Glovis Champion, carrying 8,147 vehicles and 18 high and heavy vehicles, called at the port last week, and the port completed the operations within 28 hours. Hambantota International Port Group said the high efficiency and productivity was achieved as a result of the HIP's skilled workforce and smart use of technology. And that was Development News.
Sports News is brought to you by
Sampath Bank. We present your future.
Moving on to sports news. Sri Lanka have won the all-important toss and elected to bat first against Australia in the first day-night one-day international on the 5-match series in Kandy. Sri Lanka handed 19-year-old Dunith Wellalage his senior international debut today. Wellalage accordingly becomes the 204th player to represent Sri Lanka in ODIs. Sri Lanka were 300 for the loss of 7 wickets in the allotted 50 overs short while ago. Meanwhile, the first unofficial test in Hambantota, Australia A tour of Sri Lanka, Australia A chose to bat and at stumps were 379 runs all out. For the tourists, Josh Philippe made 94 and Nathan McAndrew scored 92 runs. Dilshan Madhushankar took 4 wickets. In other cricket news, England had the chance to force victory in the second test after taking late New Zealand wickets on the 5th day at Trent Bridge. New Zealand posted 539 runs in their second innings, leading by 263 runs. At lunch, England were 36 for 1 with Ollie Pope and Alex Lees at the crease. And that was Sports News.
Cash through NSP globally and win wonderful gifts locally. From October 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2022. Remit a minimum of $100 or an equivalent amount in any foreign currency 3 times through NSB U Trust.
Business News, sponsored by National Savings Bank, the safest place for your money.
In business news, AIA Insurance will continue its commitment towards one of the Sri Lanka's long-standing corporate social responsibility projects for the 27th year this Poson. The AIA Poson Safety Program held across 3 days in Anuradhapura, Polonnaruwa, Dambulla and Mihintale. The program facilitates 500 lifeguards across 22 reservoirs and lakes to ensure pilgrim safety in water. And that came to you in business news.
Business News, sponsored by
Cash through NSP globally and win wonderful gifts locally. Will you be the lucky winner of the NSP Golden Jubilee? 50 gold sovereigns for the top prize winner of the NSP Golden Jubilee. Scooters for the 10 second prize winners. iPhones for the 10 third prize winners. Mountain bikes for the 29 fourth prize winners. From October 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2022. Remit a minimum of $100 or an equivalent amount in any foreign currency 3 times through NSB U Trust.
In economic news, China's embassy in Sri Lanka said the first 2 shipments of a 500 million yuan grant of rice will reach the island shores on June 25th and June 30th. The embassy said in a Twitter message that China will send the rice through 6 shipments. Around 10,000 metric tons will be used for school meals program for needy children. That was economic news. The weather report is next. And finally, on to the weather report. The Department of Meteorology forecasts evening thunder showers in the over eastern and north-central provinces to enhance. Several spells of showers will occur in the western, Sabaragamuwa and northwestern provinces and in the Galle and Mathura districts. Showers or thunder showers will occur at several places in the over eastern, central and north-central provinces and in the Vavuniya and Mullaitivu districts during the evening. Very heavy showers above 50 millimeters may occur at times in these areas. Moving on to sea areas, several spells of showers will occur in the sea areas off the coast extending from Puttalam to Galle via Colombo. And that was the weather report. And to end this news broadcast, a recap of the main news headlines. The Cabinet postpones approval for 21st Constitutional Amendment. All government institutions except agencies providing essential services to be declared holidays on Fridays for the next 3 months. The foreign minister highlights significant progress made in human rights at UNHCR session. The Minister of Education says $65 million is required in order to import a quota of paper and printing material for next year. The government eases restrictions imposed on public sector workers taking up employment overseas. The Cabinet of Ministers grants approval to lift the ban imposed on Angampura martial arts. In international news, the UN chief slams delusional fossil fuels dash amid Ukraine war. In sports, it's cricket. Sri Lanka versus Australia first ODI. Sri Lanka to bat first in Kandy. And with that, we conclude this news broadcast from the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation.